At Christmas, after our family reunion, my parents gave my son a pen, but other grandkids received new phones. Then my son asked me crying, "Dad, grandparents don't love me?" Then my dad said, "Other grandkids deserve because they are the children of our best daughter." We just left. Next day they were in for a surprise that made them come and beg me. But After 11 months of silence, we returned to my parents' house as if nothing had happened. But everything had. Last Christmas ended with a slammed door and my father saying something I won't repeat in front of my child. We haven't spoken since. No phone calls. No texts. Not even when my wife was in the hospital for 2 days in August. The only reason we were here now was because of my grandmother. She called every week for months, asking me to forgive and forget, reminding me that family doesn't last forever. She didn't know everything they'd said about my wife when they thought we weren't listening. But she knew enough. And she loved them anyway. So I agreed. For one night. Just to make her happy. I told my wife we'd stay an hour, maybe 2. We'd show up, eat, smile, and leave. No drama. That was the plan. Emily, my sister, opened the door. Big hug, 2 kisses on the cheek. Her kids ran out screaming Leo's name like they'd just seen him last weekend. They hadn't seen him since the summer before last. That much time had passed. Inside, everything looked the same. Same ornaments. Same mismatched chairs around the table. My mother even made the sweet potato dish my wife likes the first time she'd made it since we were married. It was almost as if they were trying. The dinner wasn't terrible. There was polite conversation, mostly about Emily's new job and Jake's promotion. I said almost nothing, and my wife smiled through it like a pro. Leo was quiet, picking at his food and whispering to his cousin about something under the table. It was almost like a normal Christmas. Then came the presents. They passed them out one by one, starting with Emily's kids. New iPhones, each of them. Even the youngest, who's 8. I watched my dad pat him on the head and say, "You're a big boy now." Jake got a present too. High-end headphones. My mom even laughed and said, "I hope these help you survive my daughter snoring." And then they handed Leo a small box. He sat on the floor, cross-legged, and carefully opened the wrapping paper. He looked inside. A silver pen. It wasn't even new. It looked like something from my father's office. Something forgotten in a drawer. He just stared at it for a while. Then he looked up at me and whispered, low, like he was afraid to say it too loud. "Dad, do my grandparents not love me?" There was a long silence, and then my father actually answered. "The other grandchildren do, because they are the children of our best daughter." No one laughed. No one gasped. My mom didn't flinch. Jake looked down at his phone. Emily froze. My wife didn't say a word. She just stood up and reached for Leo's hand. I didn't say anything either. I just picked up Leo, nodded to my grandmother, and walked out. Emily followed us out and tried to stop me, telling me she had no idea he was going to say that. But it didn't matter. They thought it was over. That we'd just disappear for another year. But they were wrong. The next day they got a surprise they never saw coming. And that was just the beginning. The next morning, I took Leo to the park. Just the 2 of us. He didn't talk much. He just wanted to look at the ducks and draw them with the pen. I hadn't told him yet that I'd thrown it in the trash at a gas station on the way home. I wasn't going to let him carry that thing around like it meant anything. When we got home, my wife was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone. She looked up and said, "You're not going to believe this." She handed it to me. It was a screenshot of an email from her cousin who works at a local bank low level, but with access to client portfolios. Apparently, my parents were in a bit of a pickle. Not public yet, but close. A bad investment, something with a real estate partner my dad trusted too much. They lost a chunk of their savings and had to liquidate some assets to cover short-term obligations. My dad, being my dad, didn't want to sell anything that would make him look poor. So instead, he froze the education fund he had started years ago, for Leo. I had no idea he had even started one. Emily's children all had funds in their names, opened at birth. My dad once told me he'd do the same when I proved I could be responsible. I didn't push. That was 5 years ago. But apparently, at some point, he had opened one for appearances, maybe. And now he'd used it as a cushion to bail himself out. Not Emily's kids' money. Not his own accounts. Just Leo's. I didn't even get mad. Not right away. It was almost surreal, the way everything just piled up. My son got a used pen and had his college savings pulled out from under him in the same 24-hour period. I called Emily. She picked up right away, and before I could say anything, she blurted out that they were on their way. She and Jake showed up at our house 20 minutes later with their kids still in their pajamas. Emily looked panicked. Not guilty. Just worried. Really worried. She said our parents had just called her. My mom was crying, my dad was yelling, and they had no idea how the documents got out. Apparently, my mom had gone into their joint savings that morning and found it more depleted than she remembered. She asked him what had happened. He told her. She freaked out. And then she checked her email and saw a message. No subject line. Just one sentence. Ask him why Leo doesn't deserve his future. I sent it. From a burner account I'd created that morning. Emily begged me to talk to them. She said it wasn't right to go on like this, that Grams wasn't in good health, and that she'd worked so hard to keep the family together. I told her I'd think about it. What she didn't know was that while we were talking, I had already planned to anonymously mail every document, statement, and wire transfer I had received from her cousin to my dad's business partners and 2 clients he was trying to impress. I wasn't just going to hurt him emotionally. I wanted to make sure he felt what it meant to steal from a child. That night I got a text from my grandmother. Just one line. They're on their way. They said they had to beg. I smiled. Let them come. They pulled up just as the sky began to turn that dull blue-gray before sunset. I watched from the kitchen window. No headlights. No warning. Just the scraping of tires on our gravel driveway and the sound of a car door slamming too hard. I knew it was my dad before I saw him. I didn't tell my wife. She was upstairs with Leo, pretending the world made sense, reading him the same pirate book he always asked for when he was nervous. She had said earlier, "Don't let her in." I hadn't answered. I opened the front door before they knocked. My father was in the front, his coat unzipped, his fists in his pockets. My mom was behind him, her face blotchy, as if she'd been crying but hadn't finished. And then my grandmother, wearing the long green scarf she always wore when she was about to do something serious. They didn't ask to come in. They just did. I let them. I wanted them to see everything. The house was warm, clean, and quiet. Leo's toy train was still on the living room floor. My father almost tripped over it. He mumbled something and my mother told him to be quiet. That alone almost made me laugh. They sat down. My dad didn't. He stayed standing, near the edge of the rug, arms crossed like a disappointed coach. My mother sat on the edge of the love seat. My grandmother sat next to me as she always had, as if she were already on my side before anything had been said. It began as I expected. My mom said they didn't mean to hurt us. She said they didn't realize that the gift would feel insulting. That the pen had belonged to someone important. That it should mean something. I let her talk. Then she said something about reopening the college fund. That they would fix it. That it was all a misunderstanding. She used the soft voice she used when she wanted to be forgiven without really admitting guilt. Then my father finally spoke. He said, "You think you're the only one struggling? I built everything from nothing. Now because I'm taking one thing, you're acting like a victim?" That's when I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't even raise my voice. I walked over to the kitchen, took a folder out of the drawer and put it right on the coffee table. I told them to open it. My grandmother did. Inside were printouts, emails, wire transfer records, dated and signed. Account numbers. Screenshots. A complete paper trail showing that the only time they touched Leo's college fund was to temporarily move the money into a private account my dad used to cover a failed land deal in another state. Not even in his name. In the name of a shell company he and some guy from his golf club had set up. My grandmother turned pale. My mother looked confused, then horrified. And my father, he got it. Right then. That he was exposed. "You did this?" I didn't say anything. He stepped forward quickly. Not a slap or a punch, he wasn't that type. But he grabbed the folder and threw it across the room, papers flying everywhere. He started screaming, blaming me, accusing me of ruining him, of sabotaging the family legacy, of turning everyone against him. He said the word shame. Then he stumbled over Leo's toy train. Went down hard against the edge of the table. The sound it made was awful, something between a thud and a crack. My mother screamed. My grandmother ran to him. He didn't get up right away. My wife came downstairs with Leo in her arms. She looked at the scene for a second and said, "That's enough. All of you. Get out of here." My father was still sitting on the floor, holding his shoulder, looking stunned. My mother was kneeling next to him, whispering something. My grandmother slowly stood up, turned to me, and nodded once. She didn't say a word. 5 minutes later, Emily and Jake pulled up outside. She hadn't even known they were coming. She saw the mess from the driveway. Emily helped them out, helped my dad to his feet, helped my mom pick up the scattered papers, helped my grandmother down the stairs. Before my father got into the car, he turned to me. "You're going to regret this." I just looked at him. What he didn't know was that while they were on their way over, someone else was already getting the next batch of files. His accountant. 2 business associates. The community foundation he tried to join as a board member. Not just financials, but photos. Private ones. Screenshots of texts he never thought anyone would see again. And the biggest surprise hadn't even been sent yet. Not to them, but to the IRS. Let him come after me. I wasn't just getting even. I was tearing it all down. 3 days passed before anything happened. Not a word from them. No phone calls. No texts. Just silence. I almost thought they were regrouping, maybe trying to figure out how to make it all go away. That would have been classic Dad. Hide the fire, repaint the walls, pretend nothing burned. Then, Friday morning, 6:43, I got a call. Not from them. From Emily. They froze his accounts. She whispered, locked in her car outside her office. The IRS had contacted her father's accountant. Someone had filed a formal complaint. With attachments. The kind that raises red flags and pings systems no one wants to ping. She said the accountant called Dad in the middle of the night. My mom screamed. Grandma locked herself in her bedroom and told them not to come in. I kept quiet. Let her talk. Then she said something else. There were men in the office. Men in suits. 2 of them. They showed up that morning, asking questions about shell companies and asset concealment. The receptionist saw them first. She said my dad went white, locked himself in his office, and didn't come out for an hour. But here's the part Emily didn't know. They weren't from the IRS. They were private investigators. I'd hired them 2 months ago. Quietly. Before I even agreed to go to Christmas. Before the pen. Before the party. I was ready then. I was just waiting for the right moment. And they weren't there for tax evasion. They were there for his partner, Richard Barlow. The same guy my dad used to move Leo's money. Turns out Barlow wasn't just sloppy. He was dirty. And I'd found the paper trail. One of the investigators had called me the night before, said Barlow was about to flee the state. So I called. And now Barlow was being watched. So was my dad. Their accounts were being combed. Their email servers were being flagged. And it was all connected, because of Leo's fund. That night Jake called me. Not Emily. Jake. He sounded nervous. He said the family was falling apart. He said my dad was screaming about betrayal and legacy, and how I'd shamed him. He asked if I could meet them, just to talk. Clear the air. I said I'd think about it. Then, at 11 p.m., I got another message. From an unknown number. It was a picture. A picture of my parents' garage. On fire. Flames shooting out the side, black smoke billowing into the night sky. And then another. My dad, standing in the street in his bathrobe, screaming into his phone as firefighters tried to hold him back. Another photo followed. Just a sentence written on cardboard, propped up on their front lawn. Ask him what else he stole. No signature. No initials. No clue. It wasn't me. But someone else was in the game now. And it was just beginning. The morning before the fire, before the photos, before the message on the lawn, there was a knock at my door. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just enough to stop me in the middle of an email. My wife looked up from the kitchen. I went to the door. It was Jake. Alone. He looked nervous, but not embarrassed. Like someone who had seen what was coming and wanted to get out of the blast radius early. He walked in without waiting for me to say anything. Said he had 15 minutes. That he shouldn't be here. He handed me a white envelope. Inside, a cashier's check. big enough to make my heart skip a beat. Twice the value of what had been stolen from Leo's fund. Jake said my father had pulled some strings, liquidated something quickly, wanted to make it right. But that wasn't the whole truth. Jake leaned in and said quietly that my father was cracking calling in favors, trying to buy silence, trying to clean up the edges before someone official dug deeper. Emily was scared. Not because of what I'd done, but because of how fast everything was falling apart. She said my father talked like someone being hunted. And maybe he was. Jake told me there was more. My dad had gone to see Barlow the night before, driving out to some rental property on the edge of town. No witnesses. But when he came back, he was shaking. My mom asked him what happened, and he just locked himself in the den. Then Jake said something that made my skin crawl. He asked me if I'd sent anyone else. I told him no. Just what I'd already done. The leak. The files. The investigators. Jake nodded slowly. Then someone else came into the picture. Because 2 nights ago, a box showed up at their door. Inside was a flash drive. No note. Just a video file. Jake said he watched it. Once. Then deleted it. Said it showed my father and Barlow years ago, during another deal. One I didn't know about. One that involved blackmail, a forged signature, and someone who ended up losing a lot more than money. He wouldn't give me a name. Said if I saw it, I'd go further than I already had. Said maybe that was the point. I asked why he was telling me this. Jake hesitated. Then he said that Emily was worried that I had gone too far, but he was more worried that I hadn't gone far enough. That if I stopped now, they'd spin it. They'd find a way to come out the other side and pretend it never happened. That Leo would grow up hearing a version of the story where his father was unstable, and his grandfather tried to help. He looked at me again and said, "If you're going to end it. Just make sure they can't rewrite it later." Then he left. And I stood there with the check in one hand and every reason not to accept it burning in the other. I didn't cash it. Instead, I went to my computer, opened a secure folder, and found the file Jake said he had deleted. He hadn't. He'd sent it to me 5 hours before he'd shown up. And what was in it wasn't just shady. It was criminal. And now it wasn't just about Leo's future. It was about justice. And making sure none of them ever felt safe lying again. The morning after the fire, I sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee that I had barely touched. The phone buzzed next to me. 10 missed calls from Emily. One from a number I didn't recognize. A text finally came through. "He wants to see you. One last time." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the message while Leo played with his dinosaur figurines on the porch steps, humming to himself, unaware that our lives had just changed forever. Late that afternoon, I told my wife I was leaving. She didn't say much. Just nodded and kissed me on the temple. She knew it was the last loose thread I had to tie. They stayed in a cheap hotel off the freeway. Not the kind of place my parents had ever set foot in. But their house was uninhabitable. The insurance was already giving them a hard time, and the cause of the fire was being treated as arson. There was no note, no evidence. Whoever did it wanted to make a statement, not get caught. And for the first time in my father's life, he was out of control. When I opened the door to their room, the smell hit me first: cheap soap and what was left of his cologne. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, sling on his arm, leg wrapped. My mother sat in the corner, hands clenched so tightly together I could see her knuckles from across the room. No greetings. No small talk. He looked up. Tired. Beaten, but still trying to wear the expression of someone who thought he hadn't completely lost. "You win," he said. I stood there, watching him, not saying a word. Then, slowly, as if it hurt physically to admit it, he said, "I didn't hate your wife because of her family. I hated that you chose her without asking us. That you built something that didn't need our name on it." He laughed once, short and bitter. I spent years thinking I was building a legacy. Turns out I was just writing checks to stay important. I sat across from him. I told him I hadn't leaked the video. Not to the police, not to the press. But I had given it to lawyers, to investors, to the nonprofit board he was begging to join. Enough people who mattered. He didn't need handcuffs. He needed the slow suffocation of irrelevance. The fake land deal with Barlow was already being torn apart. Investigators had followed the shell companies like breadcrumbs. They didn't know who dropped the trail, but they were following it all the way to him. Barlow's trying to run," I said. He blinked. "So you're going to let them hang me?" I looked at him. "You hung yourself." I just pulled back the curtain. That's when my mom stood up. She walked up to me and said that they were ready to make things right. That they were going to start a new fund for Leo. That they were going to put our family back together. That Leo needed grandparents. I told her he needed honesty more than anything. Something they had never given. You raised a family by forcing everyone to orbit around you. And now that the sun has gone cold, you realize no one needs the light anymore. I stood. Before I left, I said one last thing. You will never sit at our table again. Not for birthdays. Not for holidays. Not for school plays or graduations. Leo will grow up surrounded by people who chose him. People who show up. And one day, when he asks what happened to you, I'll tell him. Her mouth opened to speak, but I didn't wait to hear it. Outside, the air was cool, and for the first time in a long time, it felt clean. I got into my car, drove home, and didn't look back. As I pulled into the driveway, Leo ran up to me. Dinosaur in one hand, face shining. "Daddy, look. My dinosaur just had a baby." He held up a tiny plastic raptor. Probably from a cereal box. I squatted down and smiled. "This is perfect," I said. "A new beginning." And just like that, the past ended where it belonged, behind me. Update. It had been 4 months since the fire. No more calls. No more texts. Just silence. The kind that fills a house when the last echo finally dies. My father hadn't tried to reach out again. My mother did, once an email, 3 lines long, no subject. I didn't open it. I forwarded it to a folder I created just for her. It's called Uninvited. Spring came early that year. Leo started kindergarten, and I swear he grew 2 inches overnight. He made 2 best friends in the first week and invited them both to his birthday party, which we held in the backyard, with a bouncy house, balloons, and a cake shaped like a volcano. He didn't ask if his grandparents were coming. He didn't even mention them. But someone else showed up. Emily. She pulled into the driveway, her children tumbling out of the back seat with wrapped presents, and somehow icing already on their faces. She stayed quiet for the first half hour. Then she came up to me by the grill and said she was pregnant again. I turned to her. "Are you sure you want to bring another child into this circus?" She laughed. "Only if you promise not to set fire to her college fund." It was her way of apologizing again. We didn't need the words. We were good. A few weeks later, my wife sat me down on the couch and, with trembling hands, handed me a small white box. I opened it. 2 tiny blue booties. I just stared. "We're going to need a bigger house," she said. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her, then at Leo, who was playing with a puzzle on the floor, then back at her. And I smiled. We weren't just building. We were rebuilding. Properly. On land that couldn't be bought or threatened or burned. That night, I pulled a dusty box out of the back of the closet. Inside were family photos that I hadn't looked at in over a year. I slowly flipped through them. One caught my eye. My grandmother, sitting in her backyard, holding Leo on her lap. His face covered in chocolate. Her smile soft and real. The next morning I called her. She answered the second ring. "I have news," I said. "You're going to be a great-grandmother again." She cried. She said she'd start knitting that afternoon. I told her we'd visit her next weekend. No one else was invited. And that's the way it is now. Smaller circle. Tighter bonds. Fewer voices, but each one honest. The legacy my father tried to build was a castle of mirrors. All show, no soul. Ours is smaller. Stronger. Quieter. But it's real.